On your side tonight with what are very often some of the most contentious decisions made by local leaders. Where to set up the boundaries when opening a new school. Happens a lot around here because of all the growth, which means we hear things like this quite a bit.
We all make choices about where we live because that impacts where our students go to school, our kids go to school, and people have made personal decisions about that.
To zone a school that's within walking distance for a school that it would take us longer to drive there is the issue that we have currently.
Yeah, the boundary battle underway right now in the Ballantyne area of Charlotte. A new high school is going up just inside I-485 near Johnston and Community House Roads. It is scheduled to open in 2024. It's designed to relieve overcrowding at Ardrey Kell, South Meck, and Myers Park high schools. Look at the number here. Right now, AK is at 142% capacity. South Meck at 125%. Myers Park, 121%. You put those three together, all totaled, those schools are about 1,800 students overcrowded right now. So most would agree that's not ideal. The debate is over which kids go to the new school. And some are not happy about where that it could be theirs perhaps. And this map from back in the spring was one of the first you'll see here that CMS was considering. The new school, it's highlighted right there, would draw students from Ballantyne and the neighborhoods just to the west of Providence Road. Well, things changed over the fall. There are now 3 drafts still being considered. This is one of those maps. The relief school would now include, you notice here, students from the Pineville area, and it doesn't stretch quite as far east. There are also variations where Ballantyne goes to the new school or the kids stay at Ardrey Kell. Well, all of this had us wondering, how are these decisions made? What's the process? So we traveled to CMS headquarters and talked to Claire Shook. She is the director of CMS Planning Services, and I asked her, how difficult are these decisions?
I mean, it's tough for a lot of different reasons. Obviously, people are really attached to the schools. They've invested a lot of time and energy into their current schools, which make them great. But then when there has to be a redistricting of some sort, then it's hard to ask people to change their schools.
Where does the process even begin?
Yes, it's definitely complex. So when we see that there's tremendous growth in certain areas of the county, those schools will become overcrowded, and then we need to figure out a way to relieve those schools, and that is sometimes happening by a boundary change where we relieve schools to an adjacent school, and sometimes we have to build a brand new school.
It's not as simple as sort of drawing a radius, right, around a center point of where the new school is. So how do you even begin to decide which neighborhoods go into which school?
All boundaries for neighborhood schools have to be contiguous, so you can't draw islands or have students come in from different parts of the county. And then the 4 board priorities that we have to take into consideration are home to school distance, so we try to minimize the distance that students have to travel, and ideally that's going to your closest school, if not the second closest school. Then we are trying to keep intact feeder patterns, so trying to keep students together as they go through elementary to middle and middle to high. Then we look at socioeconomic diversity. So there's a lot of research out there that shows that there's increased learning opportunities when you have students from across the socioeconomic spectrum working and studying together. And then we also look at the utilization of the buildings. So in this case, you know, if there's overuse of the buildings, if there's too many school students at the school, then we have to even that out.
There's always a thought, I think, by some in the community that certain neighborhoods are more influential than others, they have more money, and that they get preferential treatment in this process, do they?
No, because we have to consider all students. So we understand that, you know, some voices might be louder than others because certain people may have more time to put into this and may be more engaged in these processes. And we want people to be engaged. So it's good to let your voices be heard. But we also, as a district, we need to look at all students. And so we want to make sure that we're getting all voices heard and be mindful of that.
I'm sure you hear from parents who say, you know what, I bought this house because my son or daughter was going to go to Ardrey Kell or Myers Park or South Meck. When you hear that thing and then you say, well, no, we may need you to go to this new school, how do you handle that?
And it's definitely challenging because yes, people do decide based on the school system and based on the school where they're going to purchase their house. And so, unfortunately, it does come along with in the public school system that we sometimes have to change boundaries unless we completely change our model of how we assign students to schools. If we want to keep this neighborhood model, we have to be realistic and we have to understand that there is a potential for school boundaries to change.
So let's be clear on that. So there's sort of three options that you're looking at right now as draft proposals. It's not necessarily going to be one of the three. It could be sort of mirroring the three together in some form.
Right, yes. And that really depends on the feedback that we're hearing, and obviously it has to align with the board priorities as well.
So as for the board, the timeline was to have them vote on the boundaries by the end of February. That may get pushed back because of all the new faces on the board. Also, when it comes to the new school, rising seniors can stay at their current school. There's also been talk to expanding that to juniors. And lastly, it's not too late for you to be heard on all of this. You can email and attend meetings. Information can be found on the CMS Planning Services website.